Welcome to the High Value Sales Show of Eversprint.com. I'm Malcolm Louie, the managing member of Eversprint, and today we're speaking with Gil Eyal, the CEO of HYPR, a provider of influencer marketing tools and solutions. Welcome to the call, Gil.
Hi, Malcolm. Thanks for having me.
Gil, you grew your company's revenue from $110,000 in 2014 to $3 million in 2017, a 1,855% increase, and in 2018, you more than doubled your company's business. Before we talk about how you grew your company so fast, can you briefly share what your company does beyond my quick intro and how your company differs from the competition?
Sure. So HYPR is a player in the influencer marketing space, but we have a different approach than most of the companies. We're driven by an insight that influencers on the web are actually interchangeable, or we like to call them a commodity, as opposed to what most of the industry treats them as, which is celebrities. And what that means is that if you have the right amount of data and the right amount of information as a brand or as the marketer, you're able to reach audiences through a variety of influencers, and that allows you to then dictate the terms of the transactions. So HYPR builds different tools that facilitate channels that make it easier, cheaper, more efficient, and mostly increases the ROI of people who want to be in the influencer marketing world.
Can you share maybe an example of your tools and services and who the ideal customers are? Because I believe you work with bigger brands or bigger companies, not really with individuals who strive to be an influencer.
Yeah, that's correct. Typically, we only work with brands, and that's a decision we made early on, because I think if you build a platform that serves both influencers and marketers, you end up being stuck with these conflicts. You know, the influencers want to make as much money as they can. The brands want to pay as little money as they can. The influencers want to get paid up front. The brands want to pay after the post has been made and after performance has been verified. And so by making the decision to only work with brands and only work with sophisticated brands, it's really shaped our business in a very specific way. So we don't work with influencers at all, which is also a differentiator. And we traditionally work with brands that are a little more sophisticated, understand the value of data, plan on spending at least $100,000 to $200,000 a year on influencer marketing, but want to focus on channels that aren't the necessarily obvious channels. So if you're going to work with Kim Kardashian, you can use our platform, but the value is going to be limited. But if you want to reach Kim Kardashian's audience through hundreds of small influencers on the web and understand which ones are the most effective, which ones will cost you the least to get the most return out of, that's where HYPR really does well.
Okay. Can you give an example of how you would reach Kim Kardashian's audience with HYPR?
Sure. So yeah, because we have such a robust understanding of who follows who online, who's actually influential in which conversations, when a brand comes in and says, look, we want to reach an audience that's similar to Kim Kardashian's. For example, we want to reach an audience that is female in North America, interested in fashion, slightly wealthy. What our tool will do is it'll do a few things. One is it'll actually look at Kim Kardashian's audience breakdown and look for people. Who else do those people follow? Are there smaller people online that reach that same audience? It will also rank those people based on how influential they are. It'll also look for twins or people who are very similar to those people and who they follow. And what you'll end up getting from HYPR is a long list of influential people that reach that specific audience demographic with those interests and that have actual ability to dominate conversations and influence them. And we like to separate fame from influence. What we see with a lot of really big name influencers is that they have a huge audience, but they're not necessarily influencing that audience's decision. I might really like Pitbull, and he might have tens of millions of followers, but it's not necessarily true that we look at Pitbull's account to understand which clothes to buy or which car to drive. But there are much smaller influencers that are very dominant in conversations like that we do. And HYPR will then provide you with a very large list of different tools to activate and track the performance of these influencers so that you can continuously optimize instead of working with one really big influencer, being limited to their terms and kind of gambling a really big amount of money. If you want to work with Kim Kardashian, you have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to see if you'll even get the results. If you work with a lot of small influencers, you activate them slowly and in a pace that works for you, and see that they actually convert before you continue spending.
So do you provide the tools to engage the influencers that come up on the list as having high influence ability?
Yeah, today what we've done is we provide contact information and a way to reach out to them, as well as a support team that helps you build your outreach program. We're actually about to launch a bot that will automatically reach out for you. And if, let's say, you found 1,000 influencers, imagine what it would require you to reach out to each one of them individually. What this bot will do is it'll actually reach out to them, do the very basic negotiation, and opt them in, get them to sign a contract, get all the payment information that you need for the ones that are willing to accept the terms that you've dictated. And because you have so many options, you can actually dictate the terms, as opposed to if you only want to work with a really big influencer and they're the only person, and they'll dictate the terms that they want.
Right. Now, wouldn't a bot communicating to me, like say I'm an influencer, say I have an audience of Kim Kardashian fans or fans who are similar to Kim Kardashian, how would the bot engage me and not have me think that I'm talking to a bot?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a bot assistant, personal assistant. It's one of the companies that's pretty well known in the space. And I get to see the emails that people send this bot, and it's anywhere from people trying to score a date with her. She has a female name, to just flirtatious, joking around. People don't recognize that they're speaking to a bot. Now, once the conversation becomes really sophisticated, it gets harder. But at the very base, what this does is it will reach out to all those people through a formula. It will know what to offer them, and it will just say, I'm representing this brand. I'd love to invite you to participate in this campaign. This is what it pays. These are the dates. Are you available? And then it knows how to understand the response, and based on that, follow up the next step. It's not very sophisticated in that. If you try to have a very, it's not AI to the level where you can converse with it freely, but within the confines of approaching an influencer and just making them an offer, it's sophisticated enough. And remember, the influencers we typically reach out to don't have a manager. They don't get a lot of offers. They're not the guys who have 10 million followers, the guys who have 10,000 or 100,000 followers. And as soon as they opt in, then they start speaking to a regular person. And so the bot has a very, very specific role.
Right. Yes, I used your bot to schedule this call. And, I know you said it was a bot up front, but I'm telling you, during that course of the conversation and the changes we made to reschedule the call and how it went seamlessly, it really did not seem like a bot at all.
Yeah, and look, even if it is, then I just say, isn't it cool? You've been talking to a bot this whole time, and most people are just like, really? That's awesome. That's really cool. So
I was a bit skeptical. I'm like, no way a bot can do this, because some of the changes and rescheduling we did, this bot was able to handle it. So if it is a bot, it was fantastically well designed, because there were some things that I thought.
And we can't take credit for that one. That's another company that I don't know if I can shout out amazing companies. It's called Clara Labs.
Go right ahead.
You can edit this out if I'm not allowed to, but it's just an amazing product. And ours will be similar, but it'll focus obviously on opting in influencers for you, and won't require that same level of sophistication as what they have, but it will allow you to not spend time on the 90% of influencers that aren't going to accept your offer.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great to have that one additional layer of filtering right at the very beginning that's automated, so that it doesn't take up anyone's time.
Yeah, it takes an average of 84 emails to sign a deal with an influencer today. Now, 84 emails, that includes about 75 or so that go to influencers who don't respond, who don't end up signing, and about 5 to 10 with the person who actually does the campaign. So if we can kill that 90% of emails that you don't need to deal with, that's a big, big jump.
Yeah. So you send out your bot sends out 84 emails, which includes the one deal that you win, which requires 5 to 10.
Exactly.
Okay? But it's all automated.
And a lot that you don't. And what that does is really, imagine if you had to deal with it yourself, sit there in front of your email and wait for responses and try to remember what you spoke about 2 days ago. So it's definitely a major, major time saver and a headache saver. And it also creates this ability to dictate the terms, because you always have alternatives. The bot just knows how to reach out to more influencers if it needs to, until it reaches whatever your goal for an audience is.
Nice. Yeah, I could see the time savings there is huge. And if anyone doesn't agree to the terms, then it kicks it out to a real human person
just goes on to the next one.
To talk about the next solution or an alternative solution that might work. So cool.
Yep.
Very cool. Now, you shared what your company does and how it differs from the competition. You've explained to me how it works in from my perspective, a layman's term perspective. Can you share with me what were the 3 growth drivers that grew your sales from 110,000 back in 2014 to over 6 million in 2018?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing we can't ignore is just that the market came into shape. Timing is a big thing. When we started this company in 2013, we had 0 sales and 0 people to talk to. There was nobody who had an influencer marketing role anywhere. Like you couldn't go to a company and say, hey, who's in charge of influencer marketing? I want to show him my solution. And it was very, very difficult. And if you look on Indeed.com or any of the job sites today, you'll find thousands of roles that have influencer marketing as their required skill. And that's made our life a lot easier. People are looking for solutions, and it's very hard for them to do influencer marketing manually at the scale that they want. So over this time, since 2016, we started seeing, or even 2015, we started seeing significant interest, and it's a lot easier to identify clients. So literally reaching out to them, telling them that there's a solution out there will get you a meeting with some of the biggest companies in the world, and that's been a big driver. The second has been for us, and it may not apply for everyone, has been a shift from small clients to big clients. So instead of selling the product at a low price to a lot of small clients, we started focusing on clients that really have a big budget to spend, because we realize we're really bringing a lot more value in that place. If you're going to spend $100,000 or $200,000 or $1 million on influencers, then you're going to appreciate this tool. You're going to use this tool as much as you can, as opposed to somebody who's running 1 or 2 campaigns a year. They're only paying a little bit for the tool, and they forget about it in between, or they say, okay, I'm only doing 1 or 2 campaigns. I might as well do them manually. So that shift upscale has gotten to the point where people, the price and the value that we create have both gone up, and we've created additional tools. And then finally, maybe the biggest driver for us has been this understanding that different is better than better. I don't know who to attribute that saying to, but it's one that I follow everywhere I go. There are a lot of really good companies in this space, but a lot of them do the same thing, which is one-on-one interaction with influencers, and they fight over the best well-known influencers, and they want them to join their platforms. We're not in that game. So when we meet a company and they say, well, we already have an influencer marketing solution, we say, that's great. We actually offer things that are different, or a different value proposition. We're not trying to compete for Kim Kardashian's business. We're going to offer you all these people that you don't have a way to reach today. And that gets really interesting, because suddenly you're not competing. You are competing for the same budget, but you're offering something very different that might be appealing to a part of the market, much more appealing than what they've already seen. Now, when you do that, you also have to give up some of the market. Some of the market absolutely wants what the other platforms are offering, and we're destined to lose in a head-to-head battle for that business. But by carving out our own value proposition and our own market, we've differentiated ourselves in a way that we generate the most value for a certain type of customer. And that's something I think a lot of companies miss out on. Right.
Now, how do you quantify the impact of your solution versus someone who goes after the mainstream one? So say I'm a big brand. Say I want to target Kim Kardashian's audiences. And I'm thinking, okay, I can cut a deal with Kim, whatever she charges or her company charges, to have her promote my product or service. And now you're approaching me and you're making me an offer to say, hey, we can target the same audience using different influencers. Now, how can you quantify the impact of what you can do for me so that I can compare it to what having Kim Kardashian's can do for me?
We have different tools, but at the very base, what we do is we have our system works in a few ways. One is discovery, but the next is we have a prediction algorithm that looks at audiences and sees how strong and how uniform they are. So if you're Dunkin' Donuts and you basically appeal to any person who likes donuts in the world, then the exact demographics of the audience, aside from the fact that they're near a store, isn't that important. But if you're 99% of the other brands in the world, demographics really, really matter. And you want to make sure that every dollar you spend reaches the right audience. In its nature, someone like Kim Kardashian has a very diverse audience, meaning she has the diehard fans, and then she has tens of millions of other people that kind of like her, that she was recommended to them when they signed up, that have, some kind of interest in her, but aren't necessarily avid fans or followers, and they don't necessarily see her as an expert on a subject. So what our tools do is they do two things. One is they identify people who have a uniform audience, and two is that audience views the people we identified as a thought leader, as an actual influencer in that space. So for example, if you want to sell hair products with Kim Kardashian, you could choose to use Kim Kardashian, or you could choose the person who does Kim Kardashian's hair, who has a much smaller following, but that following follows them because they assume that person knows a lot about hair products.
Okay.
And this is where the tool really excels. So we help the brands optimize their campaigns. And then on the other end, we insert performance tracking solutions that can understand what demographics actually interacted with your post. How many of them were positive? How many were negative? Did they end up going to a website or not? So it's not quite at the level of Google Analytics yet, but that's definitely our number one focus today, which is tracking and performance analytics, so that we can complete the circle. We have this discovery and outreach tool. We want to close it with performance in real time. So, by the way, not only against Kim Kardashian or a big influencer, but also within the 20 influencers you activated, which ones are performing really well, which ones are not. Let's replace the ones that aren't in live. You tell them, okay, don't make another post. You're out. We're going to bring in a new influencer. And the ones that are doing well here, double down, do some more posts.
Right. Okay. So the influencers that you're working with, they would do some posts for you on various media channels, and you're going to have their posts will have your tracking technology embedded within it, so that you can track the impact. Okay. Mm-hmm. And Kim Kardashian's team would do that as well, allow you to embed your tracking code into their posts that they may do.
Potentially, if you pay, if you strike the right deal with them. Not all influencers will let you do that. There's definitely a shift. If a year or two ago you would have to pay somebody, we use Kim Kardashian, and she's actually, just one out of many, many other big examples, and each one of them behaves differently. So I don't know exactly what Kim Kardashian's team would do, but some of them would just demand the money up front and say, I won't even talk to you. And brands are so interested in getting these services that they'll often agree to things that they would never agree to in other channels.
Right.
With the small influencers, you can really dictate the terms. So if you're not going to put in a tracking link, or if you're not going to post on this date, if you want too much money, I'm just going to go to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's a much better position for the brands.
Yeah. And if you need, if you want to make sure you're getting some value for your investment, you need the tracking, right? If they're not going to let you track it, then you have no idea if it's going to work or not.
Yeah. But believe it or not, this industry up until very recently had zero solutions in the tracking space.
Interesting.
And yet still people spent $4 billion last year.
Right. So when your big brands are looking at influencer marketing, what are the metrics are they looking at that says, yeah, this is great? I mean, are they somehow measuring the mind share that they're getting in their audience? That's the target. Are they actually looking at increase in sales among that audience? Like, how are they measuring that they're getting value from influencer marketing?
So most of the solutions in the space will give you two things. They'll give you mind share. They'll give you something called EMV. Both of those are metrics that I really think are worthless. Mind share is kind of impossible to really measure. What does that mean? Just because somebody posted online and people reacted to the post, does that mean they really like your brand or not? There's a missing link there. And then EMV has always been a ridiculous metric for me. It's like PR agencies tell you that your article appeared on Forbes, and Forbes has 50 million readers, so your EMV is this and that. It's just useless to me. I think what we focus on are two things. One is demographic data and psychographic data. So who are the people that actually interacted, and what was their tone of voice and intention. And the second is traditional marketing, digital marketing metrics, cost per click, cost per million views, and cost per action. So you can go and compare that budget to other channels. And if you can't compare that budget to other channels, you're never going to be able to convince the head of marketing to give you more budget, right? Because they'll say, look, I spend on Facebook, I spend on YouTube, I spend on Google, I get, I spend $1, I get 1.5 in return. Influencer marketing, you're telling me I got increased market share. Thanks. Well, what am I going to do with that? So unless we can offer similar metrics, influencer marketing is not going to get to the size that it deserves to get, because it's really a very effective channel.
Right. Now, you mentioned the acronym EMV. What does that stand for?
Estimated media views or media value. So how much, we estimate how much you would have paid to acquire the same amount of attention.
Uh-huh.
So let's say they tell me that I was posted on Forbes, and Forbes has 50 million readers, and each one of and 20 cents a reader, so I just got $10 million of estimated media value. Now, we all know that's nonsense, because we don't know anything about who these readers are. Did they read that article? If they did they like it? Were they in my demographic? So it's just a metric that is it's a lazy metric for people who want to show some number but don't really care what it means.
Yep.
And I think digital marketing has become what it is because it provides such a great tracking and measurement and reporting compared to virtually any other channel. Used to advertise on TV, used to advertise on street signs, but you couldn't really get much information. People still spend money there, but there's always money moving towards digital, because that's where you can get actual information about how well you're spending.
Right. Now, you mentioned cost per action. What action do your clients typically want to get from the campaigns that the influencers are running on their behalf?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious action is somebody going on and buying something. It's not always relevant to every product. It could be using a coupon. It could be liking a page. It could be signing up to a newsletter. So the campaigns really vary. And they're not any different than any digital campaigns, but the key thing is their ability to associate and attribute value from a specific campaign in whatever way works with the rest of their campaigns. So if they're doing a campaign that's influencer and digital and TV, what came from where? So that they can then learn how to spend in the future.
Right, exactly. So why isn't signing up for a newsletter, signing up for more information and getting their contact info the number one action? Because then, once they have the contact info, they can continue marketing with them directly and not depend on the influencer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times that is the goal. There's this belief that I don't know if I subscribe to, that the message coming, meaning the relationship with the influencer carries the big weight towards that audience, meaning that even if you get the email addresses, sending them a message directly from the brand as opposed to getting the message from the influencer is just not as effective. And there have been some non-scientific studies to support this. I haven't seen anything that I would say is actual science. And a lot of times they're sponsored by interest groups, people who represent influencers and so forth. But generally speaking, there's a logic to say that working through the influencers is still valuable for the brands, because they provide this channel where people are voluntarily subscribing to the information, as opposed to advertising where you're kind of being presented with it, but you're not necessarily interested in seeing it.
Right. I suspect in this particular case, like in all marketing, it's worth a test to see. Because I can imagine in some markets, depending on what the product or service is, the person who was the brand may have nothing to do with the product or service, right? So hence you might appreciate getting messages from the brand directly, right? Like say, if I had a football player touting a variable insurance annuity product or something like that, right? Getting an email from the quarterback about that product doesn't really make sense, but it really give me comfort and credibility. I'm not sure of that, but in the case of Kim Kardashian, she's talking about her favorite makeup. Well, yeah, maybe coming from her might make more sense.
Well, it was interesting. We just saw this with this whole craze with cryptocurrency. There's something called an ICO, which is basically like a way to buy, I don't know what, it's not really shares, it's buy some interest in a company through cryptocurrency. And a few companies hired some really big celebrities like Floyd Mayweather and I can't remember who else, but people who really did not make their money through financial savvy. They made their money through being famous and being athletes, and they're saying, I'm going to buy this, you should buy this too. And aside from the legal issues that creates as far as recommending the way people invest their money, it was just ridiculous to me. I said, how many of the people who follow Floyd Mayweather, and he has like 100 million followers or something across social networks, actually think he knows anything about finances, actually know how to buy cryptocurrency, and or will make an election to go invest in a company because Floyd Mayweather said that it's a good investment. And that is exactly the reason why people will say things like influencer marketing doesn't work. If you do it the wrong way, of course it's not going to work. And so picking, if you are going to sell a financial product, pick people that are influential towards financial decision making. And if you're going to sell an insurance product, yes, it used to be that you put a model in a magazine, she would sell clothing, but guess what? Most of these models today have mostly a male following today because guys like to look at pretty girls. And athletes have an audience that doesn't really trust them in decision making about insurance. But there are people online that actually have an opinion on it that people view as thought leaders. So when you have the data and the information, they're discoverable and you can use them. But I think one of the biggest challenges for influencer marketing has been this obsession with cool factor or fame that doesn't always deliver results.
Yeah, exactly. Totally imagine that. So for 2019, what are your targets? What are your plans?
I think what we want to end up in 2019 is a fully automated solution where you can come in, define an audience, and everything will be done for you. The system will identify thousands of options for you. It'll reach out to them. It'll opt them in. It'll know when they've posted. It'll pay them based on their performance, and it will tell them to continue or stop in real time based on how well they're doing, and it will add more people. We want to end the year with that tool fully implemented. That's from the product side. We want to add an additional revenue stream for us. So today we haven't been doing, well, we just started doing processing the payments through a third party. We don't actually process, but using a third party to process payments for our clients, which we think is another huge problem. Imagine if you're activating 50 influencers and you have to go to your account department and get whatevers for each one of them and go see if they posted and pay them. So each one of these things that we introduce solves what we hope is a really big pain point, or what we hope solves a really big pain point for our clients. And we want to get to this point where everything's resolved. We think that once we incorporate this into our tool, we can definitely continue growing significantly fast because it will add a much bigger business model than the subscription model that we have today. If today a brand is spending a few tens of $1,000s a year with us, but they're buying influencers in millions, and we can make that easy for them, there's a big revenue jump for us. So I don't have exact numbers that I can share, but we want to be on the Inc. 5000 list again in 2019.
All right. Now, can you share how you're going to go about finding new clients to use your system?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we've been working on right now is partnerships with players who already sell to our industry. We have an API that allows us to incorporate a version of HYPR into their tool for an additional charge. So that's a great sales method that's been effective for us. We have a great sales team that we're growing relatively rapidly. If any salespeople are listening to this, send me your resume, please, if you have SaaS experience. And the third is, of course, increasing the revenue from each individual customer by also procuring the payment solution for them.
Right. So the payment solution will increase business because it just makes it easier for them to do business with you.
Well, if you think about if you're I don't know, a Fortune 500 company, I don't want to say any brand names, and you activate 500 influencers in a year, and each one of them makes $500 or $1,000, and each one of them has to go through your accounting department, through legal, through taxes, through employment, through all the forms that you're required. It needs to get you a 1099. That's a big pain. It's just part of the big pain in this industry. So if we can automate that and do all of it for you, we think that's going to create, save you a lot of money and time and the people that are engaged with it, and create a lot of value. And that's really where the big value is, because the customers that pay us a subscription will spend often 100 times as much on influencers.
Right.
So it's very significant.
Now, how do your sales team go about finding new business? Do you have a marketing program in place to generate leads for them? Or are they just pounding the pavement, meeting and greeting?
It's actually kind of funny. This is a space where anybody who's doing influencer marketing is easy to find because they're doing marketing, right? So all they need to do is go on Instagram, look for hashtags that disclose advertising, and say, oh, this is a potential customer. And then we send them some free reports. We offer them some free samples. We do some online digital advertising, though. We haven't been as successful as we'd like to there. I think with the new year, we'll start from scratch. We'll probably hire somebody internal to do it, because to date, because we're targeting such a relatively high level and high experienced type of customer, it's been difficult. But as the people who have influencer marketing roles become easier to find, then I think digital marketing is going to be more effective for us.
What did you try digital marketing-wise in the past that didn't work so great?
We've done some Facebook ads. We've done some LinkedIn ads. The biggest challenge for us has been that it's driven a lot of traffic that we can't service. So people who don't have the budgets or are just not sophisticated enough to see the value in the platform, as opposed to the people who are really a great fit for it.
Right. Okay.
So, I think in our, to be completely honest too, is I think we didn't have the expertise in-house to do it, and we've sent it outside to people who weren't necessarily the best choice.
Right. Now,
I'm a big believer in it. I actually come from digital marketing myself. I used to work in the gaming industry, so I acquired millions and millions of customers online. I think if you figure out, if you have somebody who knows what they're doing, who can dedicate the time to it, it's a very effective channel that I think this year will definitely be spending a lot more resources on.
Yeah, I mean, the best part about it, right, once you get your digital marketing dialed in, especially if it's more on an outbound as opposed to inbound basis, is that you can switch it on and off, right?
Yeah, and it becomes a machine.
Yes. So now, a question for you. Why aren't you using your own services to find influencers to generate awareness of your company and in turn find more business for yourself?
It's a question we get a lot, and the challenge for us is that we really do view the influencers as a commodity, meaning that in our space, to find somebody who's influential towards our audience would generally mean that they have a business that is focused on selling to those customers. So influencer marketing doesn't work perfectly for every type of business. In our case, the influential people in the industry are people like me, people who talk a lot on social media, who give tips, who write articles. They're not necessarily the person who posts photos of themselves in provocative clothing or traveling the world or doing sports. And those people will typically have an affiliation with their own business that makes it a little difficult. We do partnerships, we do rev shares, we do things like that, but it's not a industry that naturally lends itself to actually finding online influencers.
Right, because the best influencers may also be your competitors.
Yeah, they're in the industry themselves.
Right, exactly. Okay. So what
Gary Vee is not going to advertise my business because he has his own business.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So unless you give him a big cut of your business.
But okay. No, he has a great business, right? But and it's not the same business, but it's still not as easy, not as natural for collaboration.
Yes, I can see that. So what do you say are your biggest challenges? You mentioned one that you're keen on tackling, the digital marketing side of things. You mentioned you're keen on building out your new platform to do the third party to make it easier from an accounting perspective, legal perspective, tax perspective. Any other challenges that you foresee in 2019 that you need to tackle and overcome to hit your internal targets?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that have made things harder in 2018 was one is Facebook and their story with Cambridge Analytica, and then GDPR in Europe, which has created some fear with people to deal with companies that are very data proficient. And what we saw in our case was that one, we had to spend a lot of money to ensure that we are compliant, and that was an expense that we didn't anticipate. And two is that every deal now has a component of it with their attorney speaking to our attorney, and getting comfortable with the fact that we don't violate any laws and that we're very careful not to do that. But that process adds some sales time, and it also adds costs. And I think that's definitely going to continue in 2019 as the world rightfully moves to a place where people's privacy is more protected, and hopefully finds a comfortable balance, which I still don't see, but I think we'll get to. And I think that comfortable balance will help everybody. But until it's found, there's always going to be this fear of companies that use a lot of data and understand data well. And what happens if they accidentally give me data that I'm not supposed to have, and then I get in trouble, and that kind of fear.
Right. So, how are you going to overcome this compliance issue? Right. It sounds like it's more of a compliance burden than anything else.
I mean, with us, what we did is we hired a firm that has a lot of expertise in it, and we laid out our entire process, and they said, well, here's 90% of what you do is great. Don't worry about it. Here's 10%. What can we stop doing? I said, a lot of this we can stop doing. Okay, stop doing that. And then this stuff that is questionable, let us do some research and let's clean it out. And what we ended up doing is just kind of clearing out of our system anything that is questionable or not permitted. For example, say in Europe now, there are certain countries that don't allow you to process data of people under the age of 16. So we no longer do that. It used to be 13. We had to change our whole system for it.
Right. Okay. I understand. I totally understand that. Now, how about from a marketing sales perspective? Any challenges there beyond the digital marketing efforts that you're going to try to roll out again in 2019?
Yeah. I mean, I think we touched on the issue of differentiation. And when you have a differentiated business, the biggest challenge is to make sure people are aware of it so they don't say, oh, it's another influencer marketing company. I've already seen them all. I know what they have to offer. So getting in the door and explaining that you're not the same creatures that they've seen before and that you might have different values to offer them is, especially if they're disappointed from the industry or they've had some lack of success, I think is a big challenge for anyone in a crowded space. So getting that message out there, I think, is a big challenge. And then second is, a resource allocation question, which is always, we're always trying to be at the cutting edge of technology. So do we hire more developers? Do we hire more salespeople? Do we spend more on acquisition? And there's a balancing act with a startup where the blanket is always too short to cover the entire body.
Right.
So either your feet are cold or your head is cold or I don't know, your elbow's sticking out. But
right.
There's always somebody who needs more budget, doesn't have enough to do what they need.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Two last questions for you. Who are your ideal customers, and what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Great. Yeah. So our ideal customer is somebody who's already doing influencer marketing, plans on spending at least $100,000 to $200,000 a year on it, and sees it as a meaningful part of their marketing strategy, and cares about data and analytics, understands that it's not about a gut feeling, but actually using data to understand what the most effective channels are. And the best way to reach us, if you want to reach me directly, it's just Gil, Gil, at HYPR, HYPR, brands.com, so hyperbrands.com without an E. Or if you just want to reach the company, it's info@hyperbrands.com. Either way is fine, and I'm very responsive, so feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks so much, Gil, for joining us today and sharing how you accelerated your company's high-value sales.
Thanks so much for having me. It was so much fun.
We've been speaking with Gil Eyal, the CEO of HYPR, about his company's rapid growth. For interviews with other fast-growing, high-value sales companies, or to learn how we can accelerate your firm's high-value sales through automation, visit eversprint.com.